Los Angeles, March 21, 1956. The backstage corridor of the RKO Pantages Theatre was narrow and loud. Stagehands moved equipment in both directions. Studio representatives spoke in low voices near the walls. Award envelopes were carried by men in white gloves. Outside, in the main auditorium, 2,800 of Hollywood's most powerful names were settling into their seats. The 28th Academy Awards were about to begin, and at the end of one corridor, a few feet apart, stood two women who belonged completely to that world, and who in very different ways were about to leave it. Grace Kelly, Audrey Hepburn, both were 26 years old. Both had been born in 1929. Both had won Oscars in the past 2 years. Audrey in 1953 for Roman Holiday, Grace in 1954 for The Country Girl. Neither was nominated that night. They were there as presenters. Audrey would hand over Best Picture. Grace would present Best Actor. On the surface, this was simply two successful actresses crossing paths backstage at a major awards ceremony. But underneath, something else was happening. Something that nobody in that corridor knew about. Something that would remain unknown for 37 years, until Audrey Hepburn died, and her son Sean Ferrer stood at a podium and, for the first time, told the story of what had been said in that backstage corridor. This is that story. But to understand the moment, you have to go back. Philadelphia, January 5, 1956. Grace Kelly stood in front of cameras at the Philadelphia Country Club and told the world she was engaged to Prince Rainier III of Monaco. The announcement had been rumored for months, but the official confirmation changed everything. Grace Kelly was going to become a princess, a real one, not a movie role, not a costume. A princess in a palace with a principality and a protocol office, and a life that bore no resemblance to the one she had. Prince Rainier had made this clear. The laws and traditions of the Monegasque royal family did not permit a reigning princess to continue working as an actress. Grace had accepted. To understand what that acceptance meant, you have to understand where Grace was at that moment. She was 26 years old, with an Oscar on her shelf. She had made 3 films with Alfred Hitchcock, all successful. She was MGM's most valuable asset. Film offers arrived without stopping. She was at the absolute peak of her career, and she was walking away from it voluntarily. Whether she had fully felt the weight of that decision in her bones, in the way that only becomes clear much later, nobody knew. In February and March of 1956, Grace was finishing High Society, her final film for MGM, the last obligation in her contract. Bing Crosby, Frank Sinatra, Celeste Holm, a beautiful production. But everyone on set that winter felt the same thing moving beneath the surface of the normal working days. Grace was leaving. This was her last film. In a few weeks, she would board a ship to Monaco, and she would almost certainly never come back as an actress. Directors said it quietly to each other. Crew members said it. Camera operators said it. Grace didn't say it. Because she had made her choice, and complaining about a choice she had made would not put her anywhere better. But a choice does not eliminate the cost of making it. By March 21st, Grace had only days left in Hollywood. The ceremony would end, and the next morning she would fly to New York to make final preparations for her voyage to Europe. From New York, Monaco. From Monaco, a life that had no film sets in it, no directors, no marks on the floor, no the particular tension that lives in a body preparing to become someone else for 2 hours. That night at the Pantages, everyone around her knew this. She knew it too. And when she saw Audrey Hepburn in the backstage corridor, something happened. Sean Ferrer would say, years later, that his mother had never forgotten this moment. She had not simply remembered it. She had, at certain quiet moments, returned to it. She hadn't spoken of it to her children. She hadn't mentioned it in interviews, but she had told Sean in the last months of her life, one evening in their Swiss home when they were talking the way people talk when time is becoming shorter, as if carrying the moment alone had finally become something she needed to put down and give to someone else. That night in the corridor, Grace turned to Audrey and said, "I'm leaving." It was a simple sentence. Everyone already knew what it referred to: Monaco, the prince, the wedding. These things had been in every newspaper for months. But the way Grace said it told Audrey that what everyone knew was not quite what was actually being said. Because what Grace meant was not only Monaco, what she meant was this world, this corridor, these lights, the smell of a backstage, the heat of stage lamps, the specific tension that lives in a body preparing to become someone else for 2 hours, the particular silence in a dressing room before a cue. All of it was leaving. Not just a city, everything. And Audrey understood this. Sean told the story this way. His mother said that Grace looked at her with an expression she had never seen on anyone's face before or since. Not grief, not self-pity. Something quieter and more honest than either of those. The expression of someone asking, without words, for permission to go, permission to give up something she had loved deeply, permission to walk away from the thing that had made her herself. Audrey didn't answer immediately. She reached out and took Grace's hand. Sean said that his mother described the moment of contact as the only thing she could think to do, not because it was comforting in the soft, easy sense, but because it was honest, because it said, "I know this is real. I'm not going to tell you it isn't." And then Audrey spoke, quietly, one sentence. This is the sentence that Sean Ferrer carried for 37 years. This is the sentence that, when he finally told it in public after his mother's death, made the room go completely still. Audrey said, "You're leaving, I'm staying." But we both chose the same thing. Grace looked at her. "How?" she said. "We both gave something up for the life we chose. You're giving up acting. I gave up something I haven't told anyone about. Something I don't need to tell you about tonight. And both of us made the choice because there was something we wanted more. Your choice has a prince in it. Mine had something else. But the cost of choosing is the same for both of us." Grace carried that sentence to Monaco. In the years that followed, when Hitchcock sent her scripts she had to decline, when she felt the specific absence of the thing she had given up, when she wanted to speak about it and found there was no one who would quite understand, she came back to what Audrey had said. People who were close to her heard her reference it without ever explaining its origin. The cost of choosing is the same for both of us. It was not a comforting sentence in the simple sense. It was not reassurance that everything would be fine. It was something more precise: recognition, the acknowledgement from someone who had paid the same price that the pain of a choice does not mean the choice was wrong. It means only that something real was given up, and that something real was chosen instead. They walked out onto the stage that night separately. Audrey presented Best Picture. The winner was Marty. Minutes later, Grace presented Best Actor, also to Marty, to Ernest Borgnine. The audience saw two elegant women doing their jobs with precision and grace. Nobody in the auditorium knew about the corridor. The next morning, Grace flew to New York. In April 1956, she boarded the SS Constitution and sailed to Monaco. On April 18th, the civil ceremony. On April 19th, the cathedral ceremony at St. Nicholas, attended by 700 guests, watched by 30 million television viewers. The wedding of the century, the press called it. Grace was now Her Serene Highness Princess Grace of Monaco. She never acted again. Audrey stayed. Funny Face in 1957. The Nun's Story in 1959. Breakfast at Tiffany's in 1961. Charade in 1963. My Fair Lady in 1964. And in Charade, the film she made with Cary Grant in 1963. There is a detail so small it almost disappears. A stamp collector appears briefly. an inconsequential character in a single scene, describing his collection. He mentions in passing, almost incidentally, 12 Princess Grace commemorative stamps, as if the film, without knowing it, remembered the corridor. The years passed. Grace Kelly died on September 14, 1982. She was 52. A car accident on the winding roads above Monaco. Her daughter Stephanie was with her. She never regained consciousness. Audrey was in Switzerland when the news reached her. Sean remembers that his mother said almost nothing that day. She sat for a long time. Then, toward evening, she said one thing. "I should have said more in that corridor." Sean didn't understand what she meant then. He understood later. By then, Audrey was gone too. January 20, 1993, Tolokanas, Switzerland. Audrey Hepburn died of colon cancer 2 months after her diagnosis. She was 63. Sean was with her. Robert Wolders was with her. She died at home, in the house she had chosen specifically because it was quiet and small, and nothing like the world that had made her famous. After her death, Sean found a small notebook among her belongings, not a regular diary, more a collection of notes written at intervals over years. Thoughts, sentences, sometimes just a name. On one page, undated, in her small handwriting, "Grace taught me something that night. The pain of a choice doesn't mean you chose wrong. It only means you actually chose." Sean kept the notebook. And years later, at an event where he was speaking about his mother's life, he told the story of the backstage corridor for the first time. Grace's 3 words. Audrey reaching for her hand. The sentence Audrey had said, "You're leaving, I'm staying." But we both chose the same thing. The room went quiet, because that sentence was not only about 2 women in a corridor in 1956, it was about everyone who has ever stood at the point where 2 lives diverge, and chosen one, and lived with the cost of not choosing the other. Audrey Hepburn and Grace Kelly were born in the same year. They became stars in the same era. They stood in the same corridor on the same night, in the same white gowns, and looked at each other across the small distance between 2 entirely different futures. Grace gave up acting, but she became a princess and spent 26 years serving Monaco, raising 3 children, building a foundation for the arts, doing work that had nothing to do with performance and everything to do with presence. Audrey stayed in Hollywood a while longer, but eventually she left too, stepped away from films, raised her sons, and then returned to the world through UNICEF, spending the last years of her life in the places that needed her most. Both of them chose something, both of them gave something up, and both of them, quietly and without asking anyone's permission, carried the cost of that in silence. Sean Ferrer ended his account like this: "My mother never forgot Grace Kelly, but I don't think she lost her. Some people stay in your life a short time, but what they leave behind outlasts even the people who stayed longest. Grace left something in that corridor. My mother wrote it in a notebook. I'm telling it to you now, which means what Grace said that night is still here, still moving through the world, still true. Nobody knows exactly what was felt in that corridor, but what Sean told us says this: 2 women looked at each other and saw themselves, and that is sometimes the kind of moment a person carries for a lifetime. Now I want to speak to you directly, because this story looks on the surface like a story about 2 famous women, an Oscar night, a backstage corridor, a sentence, but it's really about something else. It's about the moment when you choose one life and feel for the rest of your life the weight of the life you didn't choose." Grace Kelly walked away from something she loved deeply. She did it with her eyes open for something she wanted more, and she spent years living with the specific ache of that, the ache that doesn't mean you made the wrong decision, The ache that means only that you were honest enough to choose. Audrey understood that ache. Not because someone told her about it, because she had paid the same price, different currency, same cost. And what she said to Grace, "You're leaving, I'm staying, but we both chose the same thing," was not comfort in the easy sense. It was recognition, the rarest kind, the kind you only receive from someone who has stood in the same place and made the same kind of sacrifice and doesn't need you to explain it. Have you ever had that? Someone who understood your choice not because they tried to understand it, but because they had made the same kind of choice themselves. If you have, you know what Grace felt when Audrey took her hand. If you haven't, and most of us haven't, not really, then you know why it stayed with Grace for 26 years, why Audrey wrote it down, why Sean still carries it. Because being seen in the cost of a choice, not judged, not reassured, just seen, is one of the rarest things one person can offer another. Audrey's notebook said, "The pain of a choice doesn't mean you chose wrong. It only means you actually chose." That sentence belongs to you too, if you need it. If you found this story and want more like it, stories about the moments history didn't record, the sentences spoken in corridors that changed everything, the real people behind the icons, subscribe. We tell these stories every week, not because the people in them were famous, because what happened to them is what happens to all of us. And sometimes, hearing it told clearly is enough to change something.